have all your data sorted out, thanks to Jenna. Let's figure out what we can do with it. So let's put it to action. So I see what you did that with the schedule, what you did there, Barco, with putting my presentation about utilizing data and putting it to work right after the Jenna's. But so what we're going to talk about today is crafting results-oriented user journeys through analytics dashboards. And again, once you have all this rich data, chances are you're using it yourself for internal purposes, reports, but you can also leverage that same data within your user journey in order to spark their engagement, to lead them to certain actions that will help them progress. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And before we do that, a little bit about me and about why I'm talking about this topic. I have over 12 years of product management. I have done product management in a lot of different spaces. So I have worked in ed tech with problems around student engagement and how do we get students to do better in their courses and graduate. I have also worked in the e-commerce space where it is all about filling that basket and making sure that they actually check out. Later in economic development with more government grants and how do we get entrepreneurs and to actually start businesses and do well in those businesses, take advantage of the programs that are available to them. Most recently in the life sciences, working with problems of compliance and how do we help life science companies that are creating these life-saving products to pass very intense audits. And all of those problems that I've just mentioned have involved engagement. How do we get people to progress? And in all of them, dashboards have been a key component to getting to that goal. Okay, so now I want to hear a little bit about perhaps the problems that you are facing as you're trying to get that engagement. And maybe see how prevalent these issues are. Have you struggled, or how many of you have struggled with long cycle times, basically getting a user from start to finish of a journey? All right? Often it's too late. Often they disengage or they leave before you get them to the finish line. How many of you have struggled with low responsiveness to notifications? Maybe you said, hey, notifications are the answer, let's ping them, let's get them those alerts via email, text, in-app notifications, but that engagement has been waning, has been decreasing, it's not what it was. Have you experienced that? Right. And some of you might say, well, I do have dashboards already, so I have this figured out, but perhaps you're not getting the results that you wanted. So how many of you have some dashboards but say, hey, maybe I need to improve them a little bit to get the click-through rate that I'm looking for? Anyone? And this is one of my favorite, particularly in the space of B2B, when you as a product manager start getting requests for APIs, like, yeah, you have dashboards, but can we have the data and do it ourselves? I mean, there's always good use cases and good reasons for that, but I don't know, have you, any of you seen that happen in your space? All right. That usually they're sending you a message that the data that you have, built in, it's not quite, as useful as it could be. So always an opportunity for discovery. And these are missed opportunities. Why? They're missed opportunities because we are losing an opportunity to gamify the experience, to motivate users in a very positive way to get to results. It is also a missed opportunity to sell, to drive sales. And I say that because particularly again when you're talking about B2B, but really in almost all user journeys, what you're selling is progress. Have you heard the adage in marketing that you never sell the drill, you sell the hole? You've heard it. I know you've heard it. So yes, when you're talking about applications, many times you're not you're not really selling whatever it is you're selling. You're selling progress. You're selling a vision, a better vision of the user in the future. And dashboards allow you to project very visually what that future vision is. And lastly, it is a great way to simplify. A lot of people are visual learners. It is a great way to communicate a lot of ideas in a very visual way. So what I'm going to propose here is that whenever you have a problem like this, you use a framework that doesn't have a good acronym, unfortunately. I was going for something fun, but it ended up being UC. So you're going to have to memorize that somehow. But it's basically understand, craft, evaluate, and enhance. And I'm going to go over each one of the steps as you think about the problems within your own company and how you may apply dashboards there. First is understanding your objectives. And here I definitely don't want to get into a conflict of what kind of objective management framework you're using. If you're using OKR, that's fantastic. If you're using something else like narrative commitments and tasks or anything else, that's fantastic as well. The main point that you want to get to is really understanding what you need to do. What do you need to get to? What are the objectives of your company when it comes to strategically, when it comes to engaging users? Exactly in what way, towards what results? Is it graduation, like in the case of education? Are you driving them to fill that basket and actually check out? So those things have to be very clear, and hopefully they are in your mind as you go through this process. Because ultimately, what you want to get to those users, like we said, is progress. Getting them from being like a little caterpillar to that ultimate end goal or vision of success. And you may have a single caterpillar, so a single type of user that you have to care about. Many e-commerce, for example, you probably just have one type of customer, and that's perfectly fine. If you have a workflow application or a B2B application, chances are you have different types of customers or different types of users, I just say. You may have one customer as the executive, they bought the solution, but you have different types of users. So whenever you apply this framework, you have to actually separate each user and understand the journey of each one, because the journey of that executive that bought the solution and what is progress to them is not the same as the progress of the technician that is in the field and has to access the application. So make sure that whenever you do user journeys, which is what I'm proposing here, you have a user journey for each persona that corresponds to your users. Next, you're going to think about who is in the best position to act. Many times we have great data and we say, well, let's show it to everyone, right? But there's one user and only one user that is in the actual position to act and actually cares enough to act around it. So when I was in education, we had that goal of helping students graduate, right? And we could actually, using at the time just predictive analytics, we could actually determine what were the signals that a student was on track to drop off, unfortunately. That was showing signs of disengagement, of dropping off due to just disinterest or not understanding or just not doing well. So we could create those flags. So if you had that data, who would you show that data to? If you were to create that dashboard?
The parents, the advisor, parents,
Teachers. Right. So in this case, there were adult learners. That's true. It could be parents, right? It could be advisors. But in this case, it was for adult learners. So the user, the student, even though they're a user of the platform, they don't need to see their own data that hey, you're about to fail, because they know, right? So the best person in a position to act was faculty, as instructors. And in that case, the dashboard that made sense was a faculty dashboard. Then, of course, consider the level of expertise. And when I say that, it's simply so that you understand how technical you can get in terms of numbers, in terms of the data that you're showing. Some people may respond really well to numbers, where others, you may need to use tools that are more conceptual. And we're gonna go a little bit into that later. And for each one, you'll have to consider their problems. Then comes crafting of the narratives. And have any of you written user stories? So you're very familiar with this. You're basically, for each persona, for each user that we identified, you're gonna use a format as a user X. I need to know the status of Y, or whatever it is, a metric they need to know, such that I can accomplish aha moment Z. And it is those aha moments are basically the inflection points in the journey that correlate with ultimate success. Okay? So I have, you probably heard of Spotify. So they've actually done this really, really well. They figured out that what makes the best data indicator for whether a user will continue with a subscription with them is whether they create a playlist. So creating a playlist is the aha moment that they want to drive people to. And you'll see that all of their, when you sign up, all of their, a lot of their, the way they notify and they ping you is around creating a playlist, because they know that that's going to be the hook for engagement. So when we talk about aha moments, we're trying to find those hooks in the journey that will help people get to that ultimate success. And you want to make sure that you have a story for how are you going to get each type of user that you identify, remember each one of your caterpillars, to that aha moment, such that they can get to success. Okay? You also need to determine exactly at which point of the journey they need to understand it. They need to get to that information. They need to interact with it. And when it doesn't make sense to come in contact with it. And then we come to the fun part, the crafting of of graphs. And here, you probably all have experience with it, right? So you probably know that there is more than one way to depict a concept. You can do line graphs, you can do bar graphs. What I will say by experience is that rather than try to get to the best one, try a few, 2 or 3 for each concept, and put it to the test. We're going to talk about evaluation soon. But make sure that for each one of those graphs that you have in the dashboard to lead to the aha moment, you have a few prototypes. Because sometimes you think you know what is the best way to show the data, and users are like, what? So it's always good to go with an open mind and be open to how it's received. Again, because of issues like the level of technicality of each one of your users, how technical they are, how familiar they are with the data, or what's the best way of interpreting it. So you can go crazy there. And this is actually from personal experience. Apparently I'm not adulting well, because I still don't know what high blood pressure is or low blood pressure is, yet I go to the doctor so many times. The nurse takes my blood pressure and they're like, yeah, these are not my actual numbers, by the way, but they're like, yeah, 110 and 70, and they leave, and I'm like, so is that good? Have you had that happen to you? Yeah, and it's like, I have no idea. Is that good for my age? Is that good for my, what are these numbers? Yet we do that to users so many times when we create these graphs. We don't provide context for them to know, is that good? Is that normal? Where I am now versus where I was yesterday. So one thing that you always want to make sure is that your graph projects context. Is it normal for the average user? Or for similar users? Maybe you can show me, okay, I'm here, but where is the most similar user to me? Where are they? How about against past performance, against stated goals? So sometimes if you let people create a milestone line and say, you said you wanted to be here, but you're here, that is great context for people to know how are they trailing against their goals. And just relative to conditions, anything that provides them something to say, yes, I am progressing, and this makes sense. Okay, so you've done that. I just wanted to show this example. This is not my example, but it's FPL. We have some FPL fans. And I do like this dashboard. It's not my dashboard, but I interact with it. And I like some things. I don't like other things. But one of the things that they are doing well is what? What do you see that they're, it might be a little too small for you to see, but you see that they're providing context. They're giving you your usage of electricity against what? Against temperature. Because of course, one of the biggest drivers of electricity is AC consumption. So by giving you temperature, they let you know that, hey, even though it was cool, you used a lot of electricity, so that's not normal. Or no, your electricity went up, but so did the temperature. So that makes sense. So think about these things and now, the one thing that we're lacking here is a call to action. And that is the next thing that you want to think about. Once you build context, where are you driving people? Are you driving them to pay the bill? Is there an easy way for them to go and click through to actually pay their bills, which is what I presume they want us to do. But in your case, make sure that the call to action is very accessible. If not next to, if not within the graph, it's very accessible, because the most important thing of data is not the data itself, it's what people do with it. How do people move to actual action? So make sure that you're always actionable. And then later, the other thing to consider as you're crafting these dashboards or prototypes, because we haven't evaluated yet, we're going to do that later. But as you consider your different prototypes, think about placement and where it makes sense to have this dashboard. For a lot of workflow B2B tools, think of Atlassian or specifically Jira. It is a home. It is people get in, and that's the first thing they see, because they want to launch them into work and they want to know what they need to do. For others, like the one in the middle is one that I worked on, it's one that I owned. It only makes sense for one user out of the 4 different user types. And yes, there can be user types that don't need dashboards. And in that case, you don't want to have it in the home because it doesn't make sense for everyone. It only makes sense for a few users. So in that case, we had a dedicated area that was for analytics. And as you may see in a lot of e-commerce sites, for example, is scattered. It's like when you're in the checkout, you are $10 away from having free shipping. That's when they're putting your graph to incentivize you to, don't check out yet, just put $10 more in, right? So think about where it makes sense to have that. And then it comes time to evaluate. Is it cake? Anyone watch that show? Yeah, but basically that's how you're trying to find out. Is it cake? Is it good? So you're gonna put your nice dashboard, which hopefully you have again 2 or 3 prototypes. You're gonna put it to the test. Has anyone read this book, The Mom Test? No, it's a great book, by the way. It's Fitzgerald is his last name. So he calls it the Mom Test because you had probably, when you were little, maybe you drew a nice picture and you show it to your mom, or maybe now as a grown-up, you're like, Mom, look what I did. And what is she gonna say? Oh, it's beautiful. Of course, you're an artist. And basically what he's saying with that book is that most people, starting with your mom as is your biggest fan, but most people will actually tell you that about anything you show them. If you show them, hey, look at my dashboard, do you like it? They're gonna say, yeah, that's nice. But I may not want to use it, they don't love it, it's not something that actually solves their problem. So we have, when we evaluate, we have to ask more incisive questions. We have to really develop an intuition and really the skill to ask questions that allow people to disagree with what we are showing them. So when you do user interviews and you show them 3 different prototypes, what I suggest is that rather than asking them, do you like it? You actually ask them questions that are a little bit more open. So no contest, just what do you see there? Just let it sink in. Let them take a look for some time. What do you see? Are they able to read your graph right away? Are they able to understand what it means about their progress? What would you do with that information? So again, what you're hearing out is it actionable? Do they know what to do with the information? And is what they're doing in line with the aha moment that I defined before, with what I wanted them to do, which was, whatever, pay their bill, get into their course and finish the exam they haven't finished. So that is what you're hearing for. Again, it's not, do you like it? No, it is, tell me what you see and tell me what you would do with that. And based on that, then you can start determining which graph got them to that point faster and clearer. Once you've determined what you're going to use, so let's say you put together your dashboard, you also have to track usage. So we just did the qualitative side of things with the user interview. We also need a quantitative part of it. So there's many tools out there for tracking usage. I'm happy to have conversations offline about different tools that we can use in order to track user behavior within your application and metrics. But the important thing ultimately is not the tool, it is that you're actually tracking. And then you revisit those metrics against your OKRs or whatever objectives you had, that you look for paths to action. So are they actually getting to the aha moment that I was looking for? You also, one thing that I like to pay attention to is downloads and shares. Any idea why downloads or shares are interesting?
It's important to that user.
Yeah.
Download it, but I want to save it for.
It is a clue.
Yeah, it's a clue. It's important. It's letting you know. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No. That's good. You got it.
It's a way to propagate information that might not be clear to you, but somebody else will know too.
Exactly. It is a clue that they're sharing with somebody.
Once they download, they will come back.
But
because it's on their local device, they will see it again, even if they don't see it.
That is true. That is a good point. That is a good point. I hadn't considered that. But when I tell you what I was going with it, it's like it is a clue usually that they are sharing with another user and another user that is not currently in the app. So whenever they do shares or they do downloads, that presentation, that dashboard, is likely there's an opportunity to include more user types. And that is what, in my experience, has come out, like, why are they sharing it so much? Or why are they, and why are those users not just with us? And usually it's a good information to have to expand usage.
What's your favorite?
Of course, seasonality. You want to make sure that as you're judging the ebbs and flows of your data and usage of your dashboard, you're not being too harsh around times where people are just not expected to check it. You have a tax app and you're checking for usage, in August.
In the latte.
You're not going to get it, right? So just be mindful of seasonality as you're setting your goals. And then think about where they're going before and after. So if you have a good tracking application, you should be able to have paths So you should be able to have data around where were they before they access the dashboard and where did they go after. And those paths should also inform whether people are getting to the aha moments or when you might want to introduce graphs or easier pathways to that dashboard. And learn from it. We have to learn from it. This is just not a done deal. As with any product, we continue to iterate, we continue to improve. Many times, as users interact with the data, we become aware of data points that we're not even collecting. That was my experience in the life sciences company that I was in. As we were interviewing our users and we had released this app, we realized that one of the biggest things that they wanted to know is how they were trailing against their next audit. But we were not tracking where the next audit was. We had absolutely no context of what the date was that they were moving against. So again, a missed data point, an opportunity to enrich that data and continue that virtuous cycle of making the data even better in describing the user journey. And before I conclude, there are so many things, interesting things happening in this space. Some of you may have missed when Barca said it, but it's so true. Technology changes at a pace that it's just unbelievable. You always feel like you're missing out on something. And there is so many interesting things happening in this space. There are different vendors. Again, we have Tableau, we have AWS QuickSight. Apologies. They're doing really interesting stuff when it comes to AI. Some particularly around how you build, how you are able to build these graphs. You're able to simply sometimes speak and provide just a language input of the type of graph that you want to see, and they're able to give you one that's super interesting. But also another interesting thing that they're doing is that they're able to provide text output of what the data is highlighting. So rather than wait for your user to sit there and see a graph and say, oh, look, yeah, my sales did spike in October, the dashboard is actually telling you that, and it's giving you this insight snippets right away. That's basically reading the graph for you. Amazing for accessibility, amazing for other things like sending out notifications based on those snippets. There is just a world of opportunity that is opening up now, and that is definitely worth exploring. And I know that I'll be wanting to experiment with that as well. So if you are experimenting with dashboards, if this is a space that interests you, do contact me. Tell me about your experiences. I want to hear them too. I want to learn too. So connect with me via LinkedIn or just shoot me an email and we'll connect. So it's been a pleasure. If you have any questions, I'd love to take them as well.
Questions, guys?
One question. So on the panel using track usage, you have like the before and after and everything like down the share. How do you have like the review and how does it impact the user and how do you feel about the task?
Let me give you the mic so I
My question for you is on the slide for trackage usage. You had like the before and after and have the analytic and all the down and share. My question is, how come you don't have like the review section? Like why you don't track that, like what the users say about the app? If that's the case, like why is that not like a important factor of that?
Yeah, so that section was specifically about the quantitative evaluation. So definitely you want to have both a qualitative evaluation, qualitative and then a quantitative one. So qualitative, yes, it's user interviews, but you're right as well. You can also have like little guides or walk through feedback loops for people to say how well the app is working for them. So that is also a great avenue for continuing to iterate and make it better. So you're absolutely right, yes.
Anyone else?
I have a question. So usually when you for the most part, when like C-level executives ask for reports, they kind of want something very specific, but they never know how to explain it. So, like in your experience, obviously having done a lot of groups in which you ask a lot of people about reports and how they understand it, what's your take on that? Or how?
So my take has been that executives are users too. And there's really no reason why you can't do user interviews of executives as well. So the same techniques that I showed you of presenting 3 different versions of it and saying, what do you see? And again, try to stay away from do you like it, because it really never leads to where you really want to get to, which is it usable, is it driving them to understand and take action?
So executive would be just another form of persona.
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. It's another persona.
Any other questions?
In terms of user interviews, I think that the personas are very important. I think the hard part is understanding in the organization, saying, who are the people you want to talk to, or how do you identify these people in this case? Is it through the one person that tells you this, or is you actually reach out to different stakeholders in that one?
So is that for like an internal facing dashboard or an external?
I will be internal, yeah, for internal facing.
So we usually want to have, so the presentation was mostly around customer facing, but sometimes you do have applications that are internal facing, and you have internal stakeholders that are users, and you use pretty much the same techniques. It's always used to have, heuristically, there's no science behind this, but I like to have at least 5 people, 5 takes. And sometimes, it's something as simple as talking to your manager, who should I be talking to, or sometimes you have a user in mind and you start with them and you quickly say, who else should I talk to? And they know who else, or who are you? That is where the clue of who are you sharing with is important too. So would you like to share this with? And that gives you the clue of who you need to go talk to next as well.
All right. Well, thank you, Reneida.
All right.
I'm going to stop recording.